History remembers the names of kings, but rarely the whispers of the silent, terrified masses they left behind. We are taught that Genghis Khan unified the tribes. We seldom examine the price paid in human dignity for that unity. The foundation of the largest contiguous empire was cemented not with laws, but with the crushed spirits of the condemned. Imagine the metallic scent of dust, the blinding glare of the sun, and the certain knowledge that you are utterly disposable. The true secret to the Mongol Empire's speed and terror was not cavalry alone, but the calculated destruction of the human will. Rushing on the periphery of the Central Asian steppe, a vast, echoing plain that swallows sound and light. The year is the early 13th century. Above you, the sky seems impossibly high, yet the air is thick with the dust of 10,000 horses and the silent tension of imminent collapse. You are not a Mongol warrior, but a captive, one among countless others swept into the wake of the man the world would come to know as Genghis Khan. His genius was undeniable, his tolerance sometimes surprising. Yet, beneath the veneer of law and unification lay a system of conquest built entirely on the systematic denial of human autonomy. This is the unseen calculus of power. The man who became the universal ruler rose from obscurity through brutal necessity and tactical genius. His ambition was limitless, but the mechanism of its fulfillment required an endless supply of expendable resources often drawn from the conquered populations. The vastness of the empire, stretching from the Yellow Sea to the Adriatic, was a testament not only to superior horsemanship, but to an efficient, chillingly pragmatic approach to war captives. Their fate, once their city walls had crumbled, was predetermined by a single, cold measure: utility to the burgeoning empire. The first, and perhaps most dehumanizing, policy implemented by the conquering Mongol forces was the instrumentalization of the defeated soldier. Imagine the sound, not of the thundering hooves of the Mongol advance, but the shuffling, terrified silence of thousands of men compelled forward against their will. This was the dark, tactical innovation known by historians as the human shield. Their lives were already forfeit, but their physical bodies retained one last, dreadful purpose: to absorb the retaliatory power of the next besieged city. During the critical siege of the Tangut kingdom of Xi Xia in 1209, Genghis Khan faced well-fortified defenses. Records suggest that massive columns of captured Chinese soldiers were pressed into the vanguard of the assault. They were forced to march at the head of the advancing Mongol ranks, effectively neutralizing the opening barrage of enemy arrows and spears. This calculated act was simultaneously a physical buffer and a psychological weapon, communicating an absolute disregard for human life that terrified the defenders. What kind of leader uses 30,000 lives simply to dull the enemy's initial edge? This chilling practice was repeated and amplified during the campaigns against the Khwarezmian Empire further west, particularly during the prolonged sieges of major urban centers like Otrar and Samarkand. Here, the treatment of captives went beyond mere human shielding. Some accounts suggest that the condemned were not only marched into defensive fire, but were also strapped to the massive counterweight catapults of the Mongol army. Their broken bodies became macabre projectiles, hurled over walls to land within the enemy fortifications. The immediate tactical gain was secondary to the symbolic destruction of the enemy's spirit. By reducing a warrior, a farmer, or a merchant to a piece of kinetic ammunition, the Mongols erased the captive's identity entirely. This demonstrated that the Khan's power extended even to the laws of war, rewriting them with an unsettling brutality that few civilizations had ever matched. What came next changed everything. The exploitation moved from the battlefield to the very foundations of the Mongol state. Once the battle was concluded and the cities lay silent, the labor began. Captives, now designated simply as property, were crucial for sustaining the rapid expansion of the empire. Massive infrastructural projects were undertaken to facilitate troop movement and supply lines, digging irrigation canals across arid lands, constructing immense roads, and maintaining the vital yams, the relay post system. This was back-breaking, relentless toil, often carried out until the captive's strength simply gave out. Imagine the sun pressing down on your neck, the stone rubbing your palms raw, and the omnipresent threat of the whip. You are reduced to an automaton of effort, your existence dedicated solely to lifting, hauling, and building the empire that destroyed your home. This labor served not just a practical purpose, but a symbolic one. It was a constant, brutal reminder that their status had been permanently reduced to that of mere tools, possessions, at the complete mercy of the universal ruler. Beyond the necessities of logistics and construction, the use of the condemned often veered into spectacles of power, designed purely for intimidation and perverse entertainment. The Khans and their generals occasionally organized grotesque demonstrations of dominance. These were not formal Roman games, but impromptu exhibitions where captured individuals were forced into brutal combat against each other, or worse, pitted against wild animals, their lives sacrificed for the fleeting pleasure of the conquering elite. Perhaps the deepest measure of the Khan's drive for absolute control was his demand for ultimate loyalty, often enforced through acts of profound psychological violation. There are haunting accounts where individuals were compelled to commit acts of unthinkable severity against their own kin, not for tactical gain, but as a chilling test designed to shatter morale and allegiance to any former life. The goal was to erase the past and install total, fearful submission. A harrowing episode unfolded during the siege of Otrar in 1219, after the city's governor had violated the sacred diplomatic immunity of the Khan's envoys. The Khan, seeking merciless retribution, captured the governor, and according to historical chronicles, forced the governor's own son to witness, or in some accounts, participate in, the severe suffering meted out to his father, before the son himself met a tragic end. This deliberate, deeply personal violation served as a grim declaration. Rebellion against the Mongol will would not only result in military defeat, but in the complete destruction of familial bonds and spiritual integrity. Such displays of power were reserved for those who dared to defy the Khan's absolute authority, transforming personal tragedy into public policy. But this wasn't the end. The horror continued in Nishapur. The fury unleashed upon Nishapur in 1221 was particularly devastating, fueled by personal vengeance. The Khan's favorite son-in-law had been killed during the initial siege attempts. When the city finally fell, the retaliation was ordered not by Genghis himself, but reportedly by his daughter, consumed by grief and rage. Her directive was absolute, a total purge of every living thing within the city walls. The scale of the purge was unprecedented. Every inhabitant, regardless of status, age, or military involvement, was condemned. Even the local animals were reportedly slaughtered to ensure that nothing living remained. This was an act of emotional annihilation, transforming the city into a desolate monument to the cost of daring to touch the Khan's family. It was a leadership strategy that employed terror as its primary currency. The silence that followed the Nishapur purge must have been absolute, a terrifying vacuum where life had once thrived. The tragic irony lies in the emotional core of this destruction, a daughter's grief utilized to enforce a political doctrine of total submission. The spectacle, however, transcended the purely military. It foreshadowed a darker form of exploitation woven into the very fabric of the Mongol lineage. The capture of populations inevitably led to the forbidden indulgence and violation of dignity, an aspect of conquest that marked a fundamental stripping away of human rights, particularly for women. Genghis Khan's personal life and the structure of the Mongol elite were inextricably linked to the spoils of war, which included the women from conquered lands, often incorporated as wives, concubines, or domestic servants. The Khan's practice of polygamy was notorious, and his example set a powerful precedent for his sons and generals. Historical accounts confirm that hundreds of women were forcibly integrated into the Mongol hierarchy. They became objects, traded and distributed as tokens of favor or status among the victorious commanders, completely devoid of autonomy. Their fate governed entirely by the dictates of their new masters. The women were treated as mere commodities, their existence reduced to the satisfaction of the conqueror. Their background, whether they were from the courts of Khwarezm or the villages of the Tangut, became irrelevant. They were simply the spoils of the campaign. This systemic violation of dignity reinforced the concept that the Khan's authority extended beyond borders and bodies, claiming even the future lineage of the defeated. The consequence of this widespread practice was profound and generational. The Khan actively encouraged his sons and allies to claim women from the vanquished territories, thereby embedding the Mongol genetic lineage across the vast expanse of Eurasia. Each child born from these unions was a living symbol of conquest, a permanent reminder of the defeat etched into the family trees of the subject populations. Historians often study political shifts, but the genetic impact of the Mongol expansion offers a startling and silent commentary on its scale. Modern genetic studies have suggested that a significant percentage of the global population, numbering in the millions, can trace their genetic markers directly back to Genghis Khan and his immediate descendants. This statistic provides a chilling estimate of the extent of his dominion. One of the most famous examples of this sprawling lineage is Kublai Khan, a grandson born of a union between the Khan's family and a captured princess, possibly from the Tangut kingdom. Kublai would, in turn, go on to establish the Yuan dynasty in China, cementing the Khan's influence over a region he had once merely subjugated. The cycle of power and tragic origin continued. As you look back on the dust of the steppe, you must confront the complexity of this figure. Genghis Khan was, undeniably, an architect of human suffering on a colossal scale. Yet, he was also the visionary who unified warring tribes, established a robust legal code, and forged the political geography of half a continent. His legacy demands that we reconcile the reformer with the ruthless destroyer. To understand the rise of the Mongol Empire is to accept that profound brutality coexisted with administrative brilliance. The same hands that ordered the wholesale destruction of cities also codified the Yasa, a set of laws that enforced discipline and religious tolerance across the vast territory. The fear generated by his cruelty was merely another tool used to ensure the stability of the state he built. Every wall built, every road extended, and every victory claimed by the great Khan carried an unbearable cost, paid in the shattered lives and denied dignity of the captive populations. The golden age of Mongol power was underpinned by a cold efficiency that treated humans as entirely interchangeable units, expendable resources, and the relentless pursuit of conquest. We, the quiet historians, are tasked with examining these shadows. We must remember that history is not merely a record of battles won and empires founded, but a chronicle of the internal experience of the millions who lived, suffered, and were ultimately consumed by those empires. Their stories, though often silenced by the victors, carry the true weight of the past. The shockwaves of Genghis Khan's conquests did not dissipate with his death. They fundamentally reshaped politics, culture, and demographics for centuries, creating new trade routes, displacing massive populations, and forever altering the relationship between East and West. His methods, however terrifying, proved durable, a stark lesson in the mechanics of absolute, terrifying power. Ultimately, the deepest cruelty lay not just in the individual acts of violence, but in the systemic dehumanization, the transformation of living, breathing individuals into tactical pawns, forced labor, or tokens of sexual exploitation. It is this calculated, mechanical destruction of autonomy that defines the unspoken cost of the Mongol Empire's ascendancy. The great sweep of history often obscures the particular tragedies. We must lean closer to hear the whispers of those who were reduced to instruments, ensuring that their sacrifice, however involuntary, is not forgotten by the passage of time. This video is created for educational and historical purposes. It examines themes of power, corruption, and human conflict without depicting explicit or graphic events. If this story made you reflect on the fragility of power, stay with us for the next chapter as we delve deeper into the complex and often brutal chronicles of the forgotten past. You are welcome to continue the journey with us.